Now,
Rita.
the polls appear to have started shifting. Is the Kamala honeymoon coming to an end?
Polls indicate that it is. She did get a surge when she sort of came as a bolt out of the blue with Biden's surprise announcement that he was, dropping off the ticket. She got a tiny bump, but not a big one. Same with the Democrat convention. She didn't really get a bump out of that. Now, national polls still have her 1 or 2 points ahead of Donald Trump. That's actually bad news because Trump usually performs better than he polls. As it turns out, people don't want to tell a stranger on the phone or over a computer who they're voting for when it's not politically correct to vote for Donald Trump. But it's also important to remember that our election is an election of 50 states, not a national election. And Trump is tied right now in Pennsylvania. That, I think, is just the key. Neither party really can win without it. If Trump loses that, he'd have to pick up states like Michigan and Wisconsin, where he's a point or two behind. It's possible, but right now it's really a tight election. But the big thing is next Tuesday, where all eyes are on a debate between Harris and Trump.
Yeah, I want to get into the debate in just a second, Christian, but just on Pennsylvania, we have seen all of the flip-flops around Kamala Harris, and one of the things that she said was in 2019, I would sign legislation to ban fracking. In 2020, she changed that. Her values, though, she says, have not changed, and, whatever those are, we may find out one day. But, Christian, how much of this is cutting through, especially in places like Pennsylvania, where I know Rita and I were in 2020 around Western Pennsylvania, and there was a huge issue out there?
It is, and it's amazing to contrast Pennsylvania, where fracking, hydraulic fracturing, is permitted, versus New York State, right next door, where it is not, and the difference in prosperity in the rural areas, and here in Colorado too, where oil really is a huge contribution to the economy and to people who don't have fancy degrees and work with their hands, as a way to actually have a very decent middle class, sometimes upper middle class income. So if Trump can really hammer that home and say, listen, this is Kamala just saying what she thinks she needs to get elected. And once she's in there, it's the continuation of the Biden policies towards all hydrocarbons, really. There's a capital strike against hydrocarbons. It's ebbed a little bit, but this browbeating by the government against anyone investing in new oil and gas production really put a delay. Only recently, only in the last couple of months, are we back up to the level of oil production here where we were in the Trump peak before the pandemic.
Christian, with the polls tightening, obviously the debate takes on extraordinary significance. Just talk to us about what each candidate has to win and lose in that. And also, tell me about the argument over the hot mic and Kamala Harris eventually agreeing to go with the rules that were already laid out. But she was dragged kicking and screaming to that decision, wasn't she?
Right. Well, we start with that. Originally, for Biden versus Trump, Biden's people insisted that only the mic of the person whose time it was to speak was turned on, and Trump accepted that. This actually reminds me a little of 2004, when the Bush people were going up against John Kerry, and they insisted that a yellow light and a red light come out when he was running out of time, because Kerry was long-winded. Actually, it had the counter effect. It made Kerry more concise. He still lost the election. Similarly, this rule actually prevents Donald Trump from interrupting as much. Now, if you speak loudly enough, the other mic will still pick up your voice. But it actually sort of made Trump look a little more calm and reasoned, and let people focus on Biden's incoherence. With Kamala versus Trump, similarly, Kamala is going to have to do more than what she has in this campaign. She's a prosecuting attorney. That's her background. She thinks every campaign speech is a closing argument. It doesn't really work with voters. It's coming across as phony, and you have to have substance. She's on our ABC News, and that is a liberal network, but, she still will have to answer some sort of substantive questions, or else look like she's really a lightweight, I think.
Well, but Christian, isn't like the whole debate, though, the heart of this issue about the microphones is that the Harris campaign is just dying for some moment where Trump even so much as exhales into an open mic so that she can do exactly what she did to Mike Pence in the 2020 debate and do the whole, excuse me, I'm speaking routine. And to the next day, there'll be everybody wearing T-shirts saying, excuse me, I'm speaking, and create kind of a viral moment. Is that really the Harris strategy, and why they were so disappointed not to have those open mics?
I think that's a big part of it. The aggrieved black woman routine, which I think is wearing thin. I think the silent majority of Americans, including, frankly, black Americans, dislike that grandstanding. She accused Biden of being a segregationist because he had some slight concerns about forced busing, which was an issue here in the 1960s and 70s. But the other issue with the hot mics is they want Donald Trump to show up as he did against Biden in that first debate in 2020, where he really did come across as angry and frankly a little unpresidential, interrupting. And that debate was thought to be very crucial in his loss in 2020.
Rita.
Well, I think it is a blessing for Harris that the mics won't be long. Because that whole speaking is just so grating, I think, for so many people. Robert F. Kennedy's names come off the ballot, or will come off the ballot, in North Carolina and Michigan. Tell me about the Democrats trying to keep his name on the ballot despite the fact that he's withdrawn from the race.
Yeah, that's interesting. So they're making the assumption that people voting for RFK would otherwise vote for Donald Trump, which is pretty amazing since the Kennedy name is synonymous with the Democrats, at least the liberal Democrats, not today's progressives. I think President Kennedy and Robert Kennedy Sr. would be appalled by today's woke Democrat culture warrior party. But anyway, courts have ruled that the name should come off, and people should actually be choosing among people who are actually running for president. And the Democrats don't like that. RFK's endorsement, it hasn't been hugely decisive, but they are people who previously were spurned by the Democrats. And the Democrats did so much, waging political warfare against RFK Jr. That's one of the reasons he endorsed Trump.
Christian, just before we let you go, I want to ask you about what seems to be a fairly pathetic attempt to reinvigorate the Russia hoax for, I think, the third time here. We had this announcement from Merrick Garland about an influence buying scheme by Russia and $10 million, which sounds like a lot until you compare it to the billions of dollars that China spends trying to influence elections in the United States and also, let's be frank, in Australia. Tell us a bit about this. And when I see things like the deputy chief of staff in Kathy Hochul, the New York governor's office, being indicted on allegations that she was doing influence spying and stuff for China, I kind of have a hard time getting too exercised about some of this.
Well, right. Now, if there is one country, well, maybe two countries who spend a lot of money influencing U.S. politics, China is one. Frankly, Ukraine is another. An enormous amount is spent by them lobbying people, whether it's declared or not, or registered or not. Russia does, if you leave an open door to your elections and your political process, Russia is going to walk through it. There was a separate intelligence assessment. They use fancy words for bureaucraties, saying, yeah, Russia's trying to influence things, but maybe not for one candidate or another, maybe just to increase tension within American society. In fact, Vladimir Putin has explicitly endorsed Vice President Harris, and he explicitly endorsed President Biden. I think part of that might be Putin playing around. But as you point out, these amounts are insignificant politically. 10 million sounds like a lot, but if you were launching a new craft beer in a very specific local market like Cincinnati or Milwaukee, you'd probably have to spend more on advertising. You're not going to sway any single state or any election with funds like that.
Christian Whiton, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure having you here on Outsiders.